What is up, everybody? It is a beautiful Monday morning. This is the good brother Sin, Kevin, coming at you live with a new edition of 8192 The Truth. How the heck are you guys? Been a little bit. Been trying to get with you weekly. But life is crazy, especially at Christmas, especially when you got 4 little crazy monsters in your house and you're all about the Christmas fun. Luckily, I own my businesses, so I'm not someone's employee. I'm not tied to the time clock. I'm not forced to be in the office every day from 9 to 5, because I'll tell you what, come Christmas time, I don't want to be anywhere but home with my kids for like a month. I am all about the holiday season. Saturday, I spent 9 hours baking, cooking, covering in chocolate, everything you can imagine with my kids. And it was a blast. There was a point where it was a nightmare, and I thought this was a terrible idea. But then when it's all said and done, end of the day, it was a heck of a lot of fun. And now my waistline and my abs are suffering because I've got chocolate-covered Oreos, chocolate-covered Ritz peanut butter pretzel sandwiches. I've got chocolate-covered pretzels. I've got Buckeyes. I've got oatmeal butterscotch cookies. We made gingerbread men, ginger snaps. We made peanut butter thumbprint cookies. We've got it all. And somebody's got to eat it. But I'll tell you what, it is just a refreshing, fresh breath of air, having wonderful kids, having giggles and laughters and crazy constant pitter-patter of little feet running around the house. And all you people out there that are parents, you know what it's like. We want our kids to grow up. We want them to be able to be responsible for themselves and take care of themselves and dress themselves and feed themselves and all of that stuff that comes with them being self-reliant. But man, as they grow, I miss it. I'm so glad that we had the 4, because now we've got the 6-year-old who can take care of herself, the 4-year-old that's getting there. But when we've got little Chael who turning 2 this week and our 4-month-old, man, there is just something about having small children who need you, who rely on you, who you can hold in your hands and make them laugh and make them giggle. It's just something that cannot be replaced, man. And Christmas and the holiday season reinforces that feeling for me over and over and over again. So I am one happy guy today. So let's talk about the fights. Man, we had a weekend of fights. We had 2 Bellator cards. We had a Dynamite UFC card. We had a boxing match of the highest level. It was a fantastic weekend. So let's start with Friday night, Bellator Hawaii, the show for the troops. It's Bellator, and not too many people know a whole lot about Bellator, so we'll just talk about the main fight. Michael Chandler, former middleweight champ, again, 155-pound champ, lightweight champ, against the man that took his title in Madison Square Garden many months ago, Brent Primus, and what was a freak accident. Chandler took some kicks to the lower leg, apparently deadened some nerves. Doctor stopped the fight because Chandler couldn't step on it. It looked like his foot was broken. It was very weird. I was there. It was hard to explain. But Chandler was extremely upset that they stopped that fight. He was not hurt. He was not injured. Just a freak accident. And he had to wait a very long time due to Primus injuries and stuff like that for Brent Primus to get back in the cage to defend that belt. And I'll tell you what a fight. Michael Chandler is one of my top 3 or 4 favorite fighters in any organization. And he's one of the 2 or 3 that I feel could step into the UFC at any time and compete for a title immediately. We got Ben Askren, we've got Michael Chandler, and maybe one other one out there in one or professional fighter league. But those 2 could do it. And Chandler just put on an outstanding display, truly dominated Brent Primus, took some shots. You can tell after the fight, Chandler, was no worse for the wear, but he was wearing those battle scars. but he just put on a dominating performance, got the unanimous decision victory, and took that title back in what was well-deserved. Chandler has fought some wars in the ring. He had this one with Primus. He had the battles with Eddie Alvarez to win the title. He's fought Patricio Pitbull. He has never turned down a challenge inside that Bellator cage, and just an outstanding fighter. And I know Bellator is very respectable these days. It's it's no longer a second-tier organization. No, it's not quite the UFC, but we know it is outstanding. The competition level there is getting higher and higher. But boy, would I like to see Chandler in the UFC. I would love to see him compete against the Conor McGregors, the Khabib Nurmagomedovs, the Al Iaquintas, who we're going to talk about. I think Chandler is that level of talent, and I would love to see him compete with those guys. Maybe a super fight in the future, or maybe when his contract is up. I think he just re-upped with Bellator, actually, so I don't know how likely that's going to happen. But we'd just love to see him in the UFC. But great card, great fight. So happy for Michael Chandler. Downside of that card, we saw Frank Mir take another loss. UFC great, two-time heavyweight champion. Maybe the top grappling heavyweight in the history of mixed martial arts. You've got him, Fabricio Verdum, maybe Josh Barnett with his outstanding catch wrestling. But, man, Frank Mir looked like he was doing very well. Dominated the first round. I clearly thought he won that first round. But then caught some cuts in that second round above his eye. And he had to tap the strikes because he had so much blood in his eyes and he just couldn't see. So he had to ask the ref to stop the fight. Very sad, man. Frank Mir looked pretty good in this one. There were a few fights in the end of his UFC career where he didn't look in shape. He looked too heavy. He just didn't look good. But seemed to have gotten himself in better condition on a better nutrition program. And, he had that brief loss with Fedor in the heavyweight Grand Prix, but that's Fedor. And I really thought this was going to be a good win for him. I thought he had a great shot. He looked good in his open workouts. He looked good in his sparring and training camp. And again, first round, he looked like he had regained some of the essence of the old Frank Mir. He looked good. Just sad to see that, man. I don't know if it is time for Frank to retire, if it's just not there anymore. He's been doing this a long time. He's one of the true OGs of the UFC. Came in the early 2000s. I think 2002, 2003 is when he started fighting. Just a lot of things he can do. I know he's a businessman. He's got a podcast. He's got a family. We saw in the open workouts he was doing some grappling training with his daughter, who, very cool story. He's got a daughter, I think she's 14 or 15. She wrestles, she does a lot of sports, she does jiu-jitsu. She was actually the Nevada High School State Wrestling Champion as a girl in mixed division, not just girls, and boys and girls. So that's very cool. She's a very stud athlete, great story. So maybe it's time for him to just dedicate himself to his family and other ventures and hang it up. I hate to see these guys taking more damage than they need to, especially to the end. I think he's done all right financially. Seems like he's in a good spot. So if that's the last we see of Frank Mir, it sucks to see such a legend go out with a loss, but he doesn't owe us anything beyond this point. He has performed admirably, and if it's the last we see of Frank, well, thank you for all you've done for the fans and for all the battles that you've put on in the cage, Frank. So Saturday we had two cards. We had the Bellator card, and we also had the UFC card, UFC Milwaukee. So first we'll talk about the Bellator again. Only a few fights worth noting. We had another fight in the round of the, I think it's the welterweight World Grand Prix for Bellator. Kind of surprising to me, Ed Ruth, the fantastic phenom wrestler from Penn State, did take the loss to Neiman Gracie, another one of the Gracie lineage. Neiman's good, no doubt. He's put on some good shows in Bellator, but it's just that different grappling style. You've got the the American folk style, collegiate style wrestler against the jiu-jitsu grappling. I really thought Ed was going to take this one. I think Ed is a fantastic talent, but you know, he couldn't get it done, and Neiman took the victory and moves on in that welterweight tournament. And then we had what I thought should have been the main event, but being in Hawaii, I understand why it wasn't. We had Lyoto Machida against Cavallo. Lyoto, the Dragon's first fight in the Bellator cage under the Bellator banner since coming over from UFC. Had some high points, took some shots, but in the end was able to get the unanimous decision victory in his first fight in UFC. So a good start for him with Bellator. So Lyoto, who's always fun to watch, always dangerous. We saw what he did to Vitor in his last fight in the UFC with that front kick. Lyoto just with that nasty karate style, that side stance, always dangerous, always awkward. So good for him to see that that part of Lyoto come back, and for him to get a victory. So maybe Bellator will bring about the resurgence for the Dragon. And then the main card headliner was again nothing I was overly interested in, but it was the women's flyweight title. It was the main card because the champ is Hawaiian, and being in Hawaii, I apologize, I don't even remember her name offhand. Just wasn't an exciting fight for me. Wasn't anything special. Lyoto was the headliner for me of that card. So, but again, Bellator putting on the back-to-back night cards, two separate cards, one on Friday night on the Paramount Network, and then Saturday was on their new streaming platform with DAZN. So we'll see how the numbers come out, see how well they did with that. But Bellator being the first one to get to Hawaii for a major card. And, Scott Coker said they were glad to be the first one there, and they will come back and hold a show every year. So that was a good sign for the Hawaiian fans, and I know they were happy to hear that. Now we just need to get the UFC over there to Hawaii to hold a card and, bring that to the fans of Hawaii, because they've got a great tradition of fighters. BJ Penn, Travis Brown, and now we've got obviously Max Holloway. So no shortage of Hawaiian influence in the UFC. So they're due to get over there and put on a good show. So let's get to the UFC Milwaukee card. We had some good fights. We saw Sergio Pettis, Milwaukee native of the Duke Rufus fight school there, take a loss. So that was kind of a surprise to me. I thought Sergio Pettis was on the up and up. But it's just one setback. He won't be done. He's very young. And then we clearly had the main card fight, the headliner, one that I was very, very anxious to see. Al Iaquinta versus the Motown phenom Kevin Lee. And we all know Al took the Khabib Nurmagomedov fight on one day notice when Tony Ferguson fell out. Sorry, the obligatory sip of coffee there. Performed very well. Went all 5 rounds with Khabib. Lost the decision, but again, fought very admirably on one day notice and went all 5 rounds. And he comes back for this. Kevin Lee, phenomenal fighter, definitely on the rise. One of the clear future stars of the UFC, especially in that stacked 155-pound division. But had some moments. So I think Al won the first round. Al's striking was on point. His boxing was crisp. He was slipping in and out. Good head movement, making some real clean shots on Kevin, keeping Kevin at a distance and really working that jab. And then Kevin Lee came back rounds 2 and 3, and I think clearly won with the wrestling. He didn't do a lot of damage to Al from the top. He did a bit, but just controlled him, kept him down, which was more than really Khabib was able to do, which was surprising. So he was able to control him on the ground, wins rounds 2 and 3. Round 4 was kind of a stalemate between the two, but a good round nonetheless. And then round 5, Al just came out on a mission, knew that he had to get the win, had to get the fight, had to get the round to get that win, and just came out and just attacked. A lot of round 4 and 5, Al really did well to keep Kevin on his back foot, just cutting off the ring. He did well to keep Kevin moving to his left, which was Al's power hand, his right hand, and just did a really good job of cutting off the cage and keeping him moving back. And his striking was on point. He had a fantastic head kick in the 4th round. I think he had a real good shot to put Kevin away in the 4th round. He landed a vicious uppercut, some great jabs, and then hit him with a clean head kick that clearly connected. And I thought he had a good shot to put him away, but he played a little more conservative, didn't want to rush in, have Kevin change levels, get him down, and put him in a bad spot. But just real good striking. Came out in the 5th round and again just kept him backing up and just was relentless. And I loved, you heard Matt Serra in his corner. I love Matt Serra and Ray Longo. Those guys are 2 great characters, but clearly 2 great coaches. They've got a great team there at Serra Longo MMA. But he just was yelling at Al in the corner, this is it, 5 minutes, you've got to back him up, you've got to strike. He kept yelling at him, 5 minutes of hell, Al. It's 5 minutes of hell. And Al took it to him. Al gave Kevin 5 minutes of hell and just dominated the entire 5th round, just landing some clean shots. He had a vicious left hook that anybody else in that division may have dropped him. I mean, it was just fantastic. And Al got the split decision victory. Kevin Lee was visibly and, understandably upset. He didn't badmouth Al. He didn't badmouth the judges or the refs, but he clearly thought he won that fight. And he made that very known, in his post interviews, but gave all the credit to Al. So just a fantastic fight. And I'll tell you what, up until now, Al Iaquinta just has not gotten the credit he deserves. And we know a few years back he had some, contract and pay disputes with Dana in the UFC. And then with Al getting injuries and stuff like that, and he had to get his knee worked on, and he didn't feel the UFC was stepping in and helping him as a fighter and helping him take care of those bills and allowing him to continue to train. It forced him to go out and do other things. And, now he's, from what it seems, he's got a pretty successful real estate career there on Long Island as his other business, but he had to go out and do other things because he was injuries and he had to make money, and the UFC was not helping him, and he hadn't been getting, substantial paydays up to that point. But I think that time has passed. I'm sure he got a real solid paycheck for stepping in on short notice on Khabib. I'm sure he got some sort of real nice behind the scenes bonus for doing that and saving that card and performing so admirably. And now taking out Kevin Lee, who was number 4. I believe Al was 8, Kevin was 4, and now he won that fight. So that puts him right there at the top. And I loved Al's post-fight interview where he stated, if Conor thinks he's getting that rematch with Khabib before Al gets a shot at him, then he's a fool. And, I've got to agree. I like Conor. We know that. Conor's a great fighter. He was a champ, 2 division. But he did get choked out by Khabib, and Al went the full 5 rounds. So I think that'd be a great fight. Neither of them are too anxious to go on the ground. Just a great striking fight. I think Al Iaquinta, Conor McGregor would be a fantastic fight. If Al's striking is on point the way it was in this fight, Conor's going to have some trouble. Conor's got some real different style, some awkward movement, the way he gets around the cage, which would pose some problems for Al. But Al's boxing just looked fantastic on Saturday. And, I think that would be a real good match. That was not anything that was in the cards before this Saturday. But, you've got Poirier, you've got Tony Ferguson, you've got Max now moving up, you've got Conor, you've got Khabib clearly is the champ, but now you've got Al Iaquinta, who's right in that mix, and he deserves another big name fight. He has earned that. His short notice with Khabib and now his performance in this one, he absolutely deserves to be at the top of that division in talks for a title fight. So hats off to Al. He's probably my favorite fighter in the UFC right now. Probably my favorite fighter in MMA, not named Chael Sonnen. I just love the way he approaches it. I love his in-your-face, relentless style. He's a striker, and he gets it done. He doesn't make excuses. He just goes out there and he gets it done. He's got that Strong Island mentality, and I love it. So I was very excited to see that. So good weekend of fights. I'd like to see what you guys thought of those, and I'm really interested to see what you guys think of the other organizations now coming up to compete with the UFC. They've been there forever. I mean, we had UFC, we had WEC and Strikeforce, and Affliction briefly, and Bodog, and all these other offshoots. But the UFC did what many see as a monopoly type move, and they bought WEC and merged, and they bought Strikeforce, and they bought Pride, and they kind of absorbed all these other organizations to make themselves the only game in town. But now we see Bellator, who's been around quite a while, but always kind of been an offshoot, second tier, now putting themselves up on a higher level. They got some real stars over there, Michael Chandler. They've got Fedor in the Grand Prix. They've got some of the guys from UFC, Roy McDonald, Gegard. They've got some great young up-and-comers. Maybe the best up-and-coming superstar, Aaron Pico. I can't wait to see what happens with that kid in future fights. But I'm real interested to see what people think of that, if they still see it as a second tier or if they see it as an equal. I mean, part of the lexicon anymore, it's like the Kleenex issue. Tissues are now, Kleenex is a brand, and Q-tips are a brand, but they've become synonymous with that item. People consider cotton swabs, they call them Q-tips. People call all types of tissues Kleenex. So it's been that way with MMA. Many people replace MMA with UFC. When they're talking about mixed martial arts, they just say UFC as the sport itself and not as the organization, as the company. But to me, the others are fast coming up. Like I said, Bellator is quickly becoming an equal, and ONE FC, I'm not sure about. They've got some stars now. They've got Eddie Alvarez. They've got Demetrius Johnson. They had Ben Askren. They've got that great women's fighter, Angela Lee. I think that's her name, Angela. But they've got some great fighters. And now with them getting on NBC Sport or whatever, they just signed on. I apologize, I'm blanking, but they just signed on a major network deal to have their fight shown. And now we've got Bellator on DAZN on the streaming. So we've got some real competitors. And don't forget the Professional Fighters League, which we really don't hear much about. But I know they're on NBC Sports, and they've got that $1 million tournament payout. So they run it really like a league. They've got fights all year long, all season long. And then they've got a scoring system depending on whether you win or how you win and which round you win, and by which method you get a certain amount of points. And then at the end of the season, they have an 8-man playoff for the top 8 spots based on the points you've accumulated during the season. And each division has a $1 million payout. So it's very legitimate. Granted, it was talked about, I forget who, somebody was being interviewed and talking about it. Oh, I think Eve Edwards on the Joe Rogan show. He was talking about the payout and the tournament format and the scoring system, and he said, yeah, a lot of people are excited by that $1 million payout, but it will really be legitimized once the tournament's over and those winners do get paid their $1 million. Then it will really draw some eyes and some attention to that organization. So it's good to have competition breathing life into the sport. I still think UFC is head and shoulders above the rest of them, but it's getting closer. And and I think some things are happening here, like coming up in January, where the UFC canceled that Anaheim card altogether. On the same night that there's the Bellator Heavyweight Grand Prix final. So that goes to say something, that maybe they just couldn't put a strong enough card together to compete against that Bellator card, so they just canceled it. I mean, they outright canceled the entire pay-per-view a month out. So that's very interesting, and it goes to show where they're at as a sport. But moving on, so let's move past the fighters. Something happened last week on another podcast, on a competitor show. That, I call them a competitor, but they admittedly are on a different level. But if you listen to the Fighter and the Kid podcast with Brendan Schaub and Brian Callen, they made light of a situation on their show last week. Made light of a situation involving a friend of our show, a prior guest, a legend. I'm not going to mention the name just because I don't want to bring any more eyes to the situation, but I was disgusted. This was on their show last Monday. So this friend of our show had gotten involved in a situation a while back. Something happened, which normal. It had gotten brought to light, made public here recently because of an extortion blackmail situation, and the situation at hand was made public. A tape was released, etc., and pretty embarrassing. Not something that any one of us would ever want to be made public. Not something that any one of us would ever want other eyes to see. But it was made public. And these two guys take their show, their platform, which goes out to 6-7 million listeners and viewers on their video format every episode, and they use that platform as an opportunity to completely make fun of this individual. They watch this entire tape, this entire video on their show, laughing, making light of a very serious, embarrassing situation to somebody who has a huge part, and definitely where Brendan's at in his career, because without this individual, MMA and the UFC would not be around the way it is. So Schaub would not have the career he is. Somebody that has continuously fought for and done huge things for the sport, continues to lobby for fighters ongoing for their health and retirement and rights, for retired fighters. But they made light of a situation that was very serious that neither one of them would ever want to be in. But they made jokes, they watched this video, they made cracks that were unnecessary and frankly just disgusted me. Now granted, at the very end of this, they stated that it was no big deal, that they've all done similar things, even if it hadn't been made public, and who cares? But they say that only after making a major joke out of something that this person is very troubled by, very upset about, and would never have wanted to be made public. I just don't understand how they can find this funny, how they can take an opportunity to truly and further embarrass somebody of that caliber, somebody that did nothing to deserve this, has done nothing but fight for the rights of fighters and individuals and be an absolute outstanding role model for the sport. How they found it funny in any way, or how they found any comedic value in bringing this to light, taking a situation that was public but not known to a ton of people, and now making it known to tens of millions of people. It's now been picked up by TMZ and the Associated Press and the New York Times, all because they chose to take an opportunity to kick someone when they were down, somebody that had no part in this being made public. It's different. A John Jones, gets on coke, gets drunk, hits a pregnant woman and flees the scene. Yeah, he had every part in that situation, so they have every right to lambast and make fun of him for doing something so stupid. But this situation, this individual had no part of this going public. It was a private thing, and he had no part of it. He had no responsibility in the issue, and yet they took the opportunity to embarrass him further and make light of such a personal, horrific situation. So for that, any respect that I had for those two as entertainers, as a show, I have completely lost. I've completely been disgusted by their actions, and I've lost any and all respect and admiration for them as a show. And I hope they go on and apologize, and I hope this individual gets the opportunity to confront them face to face and give them a piece of his mind in this situation, because it's pathetic. If that's what they have to do to get listeners, then they're sad. They're very sad. But that's all I've got to say about that. I don't want to make any further light of the situation or bring any more eyes to it. I just thought it had to be said. As a podcaster, as a fight fan, as a huge admirer of this individual, he certainly didn't deserve that. And, I'm sorry for him that he's going through this. I truly am. Anyhow, so here within the next month, I am facing yet another birthday. Going to be 38 years old. Not terribly old, not looking for any pity as far as that goes, but what I'm struggling with is finding outlets for my competitive nature, for my itch to fight, for my fire, that fire that still burns a bit, down in the basement. I've been a wrestler, I've boxed, I've done football, I've done all that stuff in my life. But now I just don't feel like I've got that kind of outlet to get that energy out, to scratch that itch. I've tried jiu-jitsu, I've gone. It's all right. I'm not saying it's bad, but it's not for me. If there were wrestling classes or places I could go and just wrestle, I would far prefer that over jiu-jitsu for some reason. I like the on the feet part of jiu-jitsu. I much prefer no gi as opposed to the gi. But to be honest, and part of it's me not truly wanting to be a student of it at this point, I guess. I don't like the slow, the drilling, getting down and doing the few moves over and over and drilling. And that's part of my own fault, not wanting to be the student and really learn the sport at this point. I'm looking for more little fast-paced action. If I could do jiu-jitsu and not go to the classes and just go to the open mats, the open roll, I would, but to pay what it costs to be a member in these jiu-jitsu schools on a monthly basis just to go to the once-a-week open rolls, it's just not feasible. I really missed wrestling. I wasn't, four-time state champ. I wasn't Chael's level. I wasn't that kind of thing, but I was pretty damn good, and I miss it. I miss it more now than I ever thought I would. And I feel like I miss it more now than I did enjoy it when I was actually a wrestler. But again, they just don't have that outlet for adults. They don't have, at least not around here, open mats or open rolls for people of my age to go in with other guys and, and wrestle and grapple and do that kind of stuff. So I miss that. So I'm turning to you guys. What do you use for an outlet? I mean, I know people run and do that kind of thing, and I've done that. I've done races and trained for triathlons. I've never actually competed in one, but I've tried some of that. But it just doesn't have that same appeal to me. Part of it is just the one-on-one aspect that came with wrestling and training with boxing and stuff like that. Now, if they had adult boxing leagues, recreational boxing leagues, then that might be something I'd really enjoy, or even some fighting. But they just don't have that kind of thing. So I'm really at a loss how I can not let this fire burn out and become more of a depressed, sad, middle-aged dad, because I don't want that. I'm not going to do the dad bod. I'm not going to get out of shape. I'm not going to become that guy. I need to find a way to appeal to my competitive nature, because when that part of my personality is not being expressed, and again, that itch is not being scratched, it has a negative impact on the rest of my personality and the rest of my life. I'm not as good as a husband as I should be, or father. I'm not as good as a communicator. I'm not as good at running my business, because there's that part of me that just wants to get just wants to get prehistoric and just wants to get aggressive and physical, and whether it's rolling or wrestling, or I don't know, but there's just something missing in my day-to-day grind that I feel would be served by something like that, and I'm trying to figure out how I can accomplish that. Maybe I speak with the local high school. I'm in a big district, very populated, huge high school, big gym. Maybe I speak with them about trying to organize some open mats. I know as an insurance guy, I know there's liability there, but maybe that's what I need to do. Maybe I need to organize some open rolls and stuff like that on a weekly basis. Have any of you guys been involved in any of that or know anything about that? If you have, hit me up and let me know how you went about it, because it's something I need for my own mental and physical health. I need to do something like that. So hit me up with that, and let me know your thoughts, or if you have any experience in that kind of thing. But well, guys, I'm gonna let you go here. It's been good to get back with you. We had a great weekend of fights. We've got some big ones coming up. We've got Jones Gustafson 2, and I could not be more excited. I'm pulling for Gus in this one. Like he's come out and said, I feel I won that first one as well as many people did, and John didn't want the rematch, so what does that tell you? And I've got to agree, man. I think Gus poses some problems. Unfortunately, it's been, 4 years since that first fight, so I hope Gus has still got the same fire in the tank that he had before, and I hope he can bring that fight to John this time, because I would love nothing more to see John take an ass whooping and lose that belt officially this time, because I'm just not a fan of John. I know some people are, but I am not. I would love to see Gus put it on him and walk away with that belt. And then we've got Cyborg, Amanda Nunes, which is a big female fight. I don't think it's really going to sell much, because there's not many people that are really interested in any of that. But it is a big fight for us purists of the sport. Cyborg is just an animal herself, and Nunes is as good as we've ever seen in the female rank. So we'll get back and we'll chat about that more, guys. Until next time, been good to be with you. From the Godfather, I spoke to him just the other day. He wanted me to give you his best until he gets back. From the both of us, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, Happy Kwanzaa, Happy Hanukkah. I'm out. Peace.